My name is Rob Roie, and I am a single father coach, and I help single fathers build life-changing relationships with their kids. I help them create really solid, healthy boundaries. And really what I'm chasing after and what my clients are chasing after is to create a legacy that extends beyond their career and beyond their bank account. So that's kind of the tagline of who I am and what I do. But similar to you, I also have a podcast, and my podcast is called The Business of Being Dad. And I release new episodes every Tuesday. And that is a great place to find me. It's a great place to, maybe kind of get to know me, get to know my style, what I'm all about. And within each of my episodes, I have show notes that have links to my website, my email, and also to a free strategy call. I call it a free fatherhood strategy call. And really the goal of that call, it's open to anyone. And it is a no sales call. It is a no pressure call. My goal is to have a conversation with you, is to just give you a half hour of my time to address whatever is the most pressing fatherhood issue in your life, and to unpack that with you and to try to help provide you in that short period of time with at least one solid action item that you can take with you so that you can implement right away and start to see progress in that most pressing area. So that is, a little bit about how people can find me. But I feel like I haven't told you actually who I am. So I am a father, and I am a single father, and I am a single father of five daughters. Their ages now are ages 14 to 28. My oldest are twins at 28. And my journey has been a kind of a one that has taken me through different stages. And so, I mean, right now, I am in a great spot. My life is good. Things are solid. My kids are happy and thriving, and I'm glad to be here. But this is not how it always was for me. When I became a single father, like so many people, I was a little bit lost, and I felt overwhelmed, and I felt the pressure, the weight of the kind of responsibility that entailed. That was just heavy on me. And I struggled with it, and I struggled with it pretty significantly. I had anxiety issues. I had trouble sleeping. I ended up, maybe resorting to probably drinking a little bit more than I should have, and kind of resorting to different coping mechanisms that weren't necessarily healthy. But I looked around and I just didn't know where to go. I had some friends who were maybe single fathers, and I was able to have conversations with them. But outside of my own personal group, there really weren't a lot of resources out there. And there really wasn't a lot out there that I was able to see. And over time, I learned and I began to realize that this is probably the most underserved sector of fatherhood that's out there, or sector of parenting that's out there. And I've actually, sometimes I refer to this group, my group, as the forgotten fathers, the individuals who just, we really haven't done an excellent job at stepping up as a society to really serve this population. And so that's the space that I've decided to step into. My background is healthcare. I have 28 years experience working at children's hospitals as a respiratory therapist. I have a background as working in flights and doing kind of flight rescue type of work within that role. And, so I've always had it in my heart to help people and to serve people. And now I am shifting. About a year ago, I started this process of shifting my career from one of helping and serving within the healthcare field to serving other single fathers that are out there.
I know for a lot of single fathers, they always feel abandoned, and a lot of them get consumed by the anxiety, by the anger, by the frustration. They feel that society has left them to fend for themselves, whereas maybe the woman has the resources available to them. Many times they may say that, well, the government finances them through the child support. They may give them assets, such as they get the house and they get the quality time with the children. because they usually go over to the children. So for you, when you went through that, what are some of the things that you went through that maybe some other men you hear complain online, such as, I don't see my kids, I'm worse off than I was previously, and I just feel like I have to fight against the world all over again?
Yeah. So some of, I'm guessing that my story isn't all that unique, but I will say this. I am very fortunate that I live in Colorado. And what I mean by that is a lot of the kind of custody decisions are kind of state by state as far as how those are enforced. And within the state of Colorado, they do really push towards a 50-50 custody for both parties whenever possible. And I think that is probably becoming more prevalent around the country, but that has not always been the case. And it is still very lopsided overall in the favor of the mom as far as parenting time. But to be more specific to my story, um, I went through a lot of the things you're discussing. I was ordered to pay an extraordinary amount of alimony and, in addition to that, child support, even though I had essentially 50-50 custody of the kids. And I had to fight for the 50-50 custody. It was not granted to me. I had to go through the process uh, of having a lawyer of going through the legal system because at the time, we had somewhat of a volatile separation and divorce, and part of that volatility um, led to us kind of digging our heels in the ground a little bit more. And I don't necessarily recommend that approach. I mean, whenever you can settle it outside the court systems, it's going to be much more agreeable. And, once you start bringing in lawyers, it automatically leads you to a point of being a contrary relationship. But sometimes it's necessary. And in my case, it was, or I felt that it was. So we had to go through that whole process, and it cost me a lot of money. And then I ended up paying about 60% of my income to my ex-wife for that first chunk of time between the alimony and child support. And so that was a struggle for me. And so, as you had mentioned, my life was clearly felt like it was worse off, at least from that standpoint, as I was entering into this process. And I was trying to show my kids that I was there and I was available and I would be present, but I was felt that I was put in a system or in a situation where I was required to work more than I wanted to in order to provide for them appropriately. And so, yeah, that challenge was real and it lasted for a while. And I did struggle with blame and I did struggle with resentment. And I'm not even saying that I shouldn't have, felt that way or felt those things, but I can tell you it didn't serve me, and when I was sitting in this place of blame and I was sitting in this place of resentment, it was not helping me. And more importantly, it was not helping my kids. And, our kids do not ever need to see us as ex-spouses saying or doing anything negative towards their other parent. And I did make sure that I never said anything negative about the girl's mom. But boy, those thoughts were there. and they and I had a lot of struggle internally with that. And so, that's that piece of the isolation that a lot of people don't talk about. It's not just not having a lot of people around to talk with, it's having these really stressful things in your life that you have to internalize or you feel like you have to internalize. And so, yeah, that was a struggle, but, we made it through it. And I can share more about that if you like, but those are some of the things I went through.
I look at some of the women I've dated, and I don't have any children. And if I would have children with them, I already know all the names that I would be called, right? They would call me a monster. They would call me all these other things. And thank God I have a thick skin because I would just brush it off and continue with on my way. But if I had children and I was in a situation where I was married with them and there was a possibility of me losing myself, the finances, for the most part, you can recover from, right? But when you start to lose yourself, you become a person you didn't think you ever were, because now you're in a situation where you have the option to be petty. You have the option to be vengeful. You have the option to be spiteful. You have the option to call this person names, especially when you feel that they're holding your feet to the hot coal and just taking everything from you. I remember I was watching an interview and there was a fantastic part of it. And I said to myself, this is where I believe a lot of men struggle, is that when there's a separation or a breakdown of the marital unit and they decide to move out and they give up the house and everything, if they start to build a new family, they still have the ghost of Christmas past there, right? They still have, okay, I want to get another house, but I'm still 50-50 on this mortgage. I want to start a new family, but I'm still spending X amount of dollars in spousal support and child support. But when you're able to overcome that, it's like a period of triumph. So for you, when you were able to not go down the road of continuing to be vengeful, spiteful, and having these thoughts of, I want to call her all these names. How did that feel to let go of that part of your life?
Yeah, well, I'd like to share a story that kind of led me down that path. It kind of led me to that turning point. And while I say that I never really said anything derogatory about the girl's mom, which is true, I'm referring to towards the kids. I did still, vent about her to my friends, and I still did, kind of struggle with that with my family and others, my parents, I mean, and others. Um, but there was a moment that kind of changed everything for me. Here's the thing: is that when you are in that state of blame and you're in that state of you're basically in a state of being a victim and feeling like you have been victimized. And sometimes you have, right? I mean, that's not fake news, right? Sometimes you were a victim. But this is the story of what happened to me is I remember clearly there was a moment where I went to pick up my daughters for their parenting time, and my oldest two daughters, who were 14, 15 at the time, refused to get in the car with me, and they refused to come with me for my time with them. And it kind of broke me a little bit, if I'm being honest. I mean, it led me down this kind of spiraling path. And it's this feeling of feeling rejected and feeling a lot of anger. And really, the first thoughts that were going through my head were, what is their mom telling them about me? What is it that's got them to this point where they don't want anything to do with me? And those were my initial thoughts. And that's what sat with me for a while. But there was a moment when I was in my house alone at night, just kind of looking at myself in the mirror, probably looking like a crazy person as I was like kind of yelling at myself in the mirror, having a conversation that was kind of rough with myself. And I basically was just saying, Rob, this cannot be what your life is going to be like. This can't be the end of the story. There's got to be more to it than this. And, I've always loved my family, but I made mistakes. I made mistakes during the separation process. I made mistakes after we were divorced. I didn't always handle things well with my oldest girls, and I struggled in my relationship with them at times leading up to that. And so I had this conversation, and you know, I had earlier that day I had been listening to a podcast, and within that podcast, the host had shared this phrase. He had said, how has your leadership contributed to this negative result? And he was referring to the business space and referring to goals not being met. But I internalized that and I basically asked myself that question. But I changed the word leadership to parenting. And I asked myself, how has your parenting contributed to this result, meaning this kind of broken, strained relationship with your daughters? And when I did that, that just changed everything for me. It forced me to look at myself. But the other thing that it did was it moved me from this place of being a victim where everything is happening to me to being empowered, where I now had the ability to affect my life moving forward. And so I made a commitment to myself, again, in a quiet house, just me in the mirror, talking to ourselves. I made a commitment that I was going to live my life differently moving forward. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but to me, that was the line in the sand. That was the moment where my life changed forever. And I started really focusing on what I could do differently moving forward, how I could reach out to the girls in a more positive and, kind of non-emotionally threatening way, how I could really try to connect with them regardless, and this is the key, regardless of their response and regardless of what I received in return from that relationship. And so that was a commitment I made to myself. And without ever sharing it with my oldest girls, I made that commitment to them as well, that I was going to be a different dad moving forward. And I was, and not perfectly, not without mistake, but consistently taking steps on a consistent basis to try to mend that relationship. And I'm so thankful that I did, right? Because it's very easy to just walk away. It would have been very easy to just walk away and say, you know what? I've tried. They don't want anything to do with me. They're teenagers now. I can't force them. Um, but that would have been the wrong thing to do, of course. And that definitely would have been the wrong thing for them. So,
Looking back, was that something that you had to struggle with to let go and say, I'm going to do things this way, regardless of the response back to me?
yes, because unlike what you shared about yourself, I did not have particularly thick skin, especially not in terms of not when it came to my daughters. My skin was pretty thin in those relationships because you're already worried about yourself when you are a father or a mother who's going through a separation or divorce. You're already questioning everything that you're doing. You're already wondering um, how you're already wondering how you're screwing up your kids, and you're trying your best not to, but you know that in some way your decisions have hurt them, and it's hurt them from the standpoint of they are experiencing pain as a result of this decision that their mom and I made. And so yes, it was something I struggled with because I did not have thick skin. And it's not like I started I started making these positive steps and then everything changed. No, it was like a solid 2 to 3 year process of just being consistent, continuing to invite them over, continuing to try to reach out to them, continuing to try to celebrate them and to be there for them regardless of whether or not they wanted me to or not, but not forcing it, just being there. And one of the things that I did that was actually made a huge impact, and it was recommended to me by a counselor I was seeing at the time, but it was to just listen and not offer any advice, in particular in my relationship with my daughters. And for a father, that's hard to do. That is really, for a father of teenage daughters, that's really hard to do. But I made a commitment to do that. And what I found was after just listening and asking questions and trying to show them, not just trying to show them, but I also proved to myself, hey, you don't have to try to control everything that they're doing. You don't have to try to micromanage them. And if I had tried, it wouldn't have worked. But after doing that for a period of time, what I found was they started coming to me with questions. They started asking for my opinion. And that's when I realized, wow, things are moving. Things are kind of turning the corner a little bit. And now I'm happy to say, while I would always like to improve my relationship with them, with all of my kids, I'm never just sitting on my laurels and happy with where things are. I am very happy with the progress that we have made from that time to now.
The men that you deal with, Rob, what are some of the struggles or commonalities in the struggles that they experience as a single father moving forward from the situation that has unfortunately ended?
Yeah, I mean, there are common struggles that they Well, some of the most common struggles that they have is we've already talked about a little bit. There's definitely that common feeling of feeling isolated and feeling alone, not just within, from a societal standpoint, but even within their own families. A loss of friendships, a loss of joint friendships that they had with their spouse, and now they've lost a lot of contact with those individuals. There's also this feeling of really kind of questioning their abilities. This feeling of, am I capable of um, providing for my kids the things that they need? Am I capable of providing both that? They wouldn't word it this way, but what it comes down to, am I capable of providing both that kind of structure and support that they need, while at the same time also providing that emotional and nurturing piece that they need? And that is something that they struggle with. But the way it comes out is, I just don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have what it takes to connect with my kids. Or I am just worried I'm going to screw my kids up. That's really all I want from you, Rob. I want to have a conversation about how I cannot screw my kids up any worse than we already have. And it's kind of a harsh way to look at yourself if you're in that situation, but I get it because I felt those things too. And then the another really common struggle, and this probably won't surprise you, is just the struggle of trying to balance all the responsibilities. It'd be easy to say work-life balance, but it's so much more than work and life. It's all those things that fall under work and fall under life. It's the financials, the financial piece, like what I shared. I feel like I now have additional financial stresses, but in order to meet those financial demands, it takes away from the time I have with my family. Or I'm trying to be there for my family, but by doing that, I am giving up a part of myself, and I'm giving up my own kind of self care and personal health. And there's just so many different elements to balance that kind of get overlooked because the scales are not just twofold. It's not just work life. There's more like 10, 12 things within different domains of our life that all need to be kind of balanced. And by balance, I don't mean equal balance, but I mean there needs to be integration and harmony and between all those different areas of our life, really for us to reach our potential and to be the best father we can be for our kids.
I look at some of the men that I've communicated with who are separated, divorced, or who are living common law, but they're single fathers nonetheless from their current situation. And one thing that I have noticed from them is that they try to make sure that they can experience a different type of love than the one they had previously. So, for example, if they were married and they were the type to shower her with gifts, provide her all this time, if that ends, they tend to negotiate within themselves, saying, I'm not going to give this type of love because this type of love led to this type of outcome. And then the next person may get a version of themselves, which isn't true to who they really are. They may enjoy these small things. They may enjoy saying that I love you. They may enjoy showering her gifts, but because they were quote unquote burned from a past relationship, they're kind of hesitant to love the same way because it hurts. Did you feel the pain from the type of love that you gave when your relationship ended and in your subsequent relationships afterwards?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very deep and complex question because it really is. Because first of all, yes, I did experience some of that. And you know, I would really have to get introspective to really kind of understand like exactly what I was feeling or thinking. I can just speak to what I did and what my actions were. Um, because what you're describing essentially is almost like a form of overcompensating for things that have happened in the past. And I think that's natural for all of us, right? Whether it's a marriage relationship or a friendship or a job or whatever that relationship or that whatever that relationship is, when you get burned, your response is to do things differently the next time. But I feel like you're making a good point. You're asking a question, but you're making a really solid point, which is that how is that actually going to work out for you if you're not being true to yourself and if you're not being the person that you are? Um, so I don't know, and I hate to give that answer, but I don't know exactly how it affected me. I do know that it affected me, but I can say that my dating life following my the breakup of my marriage um, was all over the map. And so I've dated people that were just like my ex-wife, and I've dated people that were very different, complete polar opposites. And I'm actually kind of in this period right now where I am have chosen not to date for a period of time while I am focusing on some other things. And that's a personal decision. That's not a recommendation that I would give to other people necessarily. But that's something that I've felt that I needed to do for me, based on kind of some things that I'm pursuing and what I'm doing in my life right now. So I apologize for not giving a more direct answer, but that's the best I can do for you there.
No, that's perfectly fine. It reminded me when you're discussing that of a situation that I went through when one of my relationships ended. I took about 12 months between my next relationship. I was interacting with people of the opposite sex, but it wasn't anything serious, or I wasn't doing anything that would have complicated the relationship for those who could read between the lines. And one thing that I learned is that I had a lot of growing up to do. I felt that the type of women that I wanted to be with at that point in my life, this was probably my late 20s, so it wasn't that long ago, wasn't the type of woman I was dating. I was dating women that were in my pool of dating because I strongly believe that each and every one of us in certain parts of our life attract certain types of people and then we just pick, right? There could be a time in our life where we're really down on our luck and the men or women around us are broken in a different way, perhaps. And that's what we're attracting because we're broken. So as I began to mature and change what I wanted, I started to be around better women, better by the criteria that I've established for myself. And I realized how immature that I was before because despite popular belief, it's not always the other person's fault. Some things I did wrong, and there's some things that she did wrong. And then we were just wrong for each other as time went on. We were right in the beginning, but then we just grew in two different ways. So when I asked you that question, it was in a way for me to self reflect and say, I went through something like this. It didn't reach the seriousness of a Rob who was married with children, but I can appreciate how it is to have a relationship not succeed in the way that you wanted to, and you're still trying to navigate your life afterwards, which can be difficult, especially for men who are conditioned in a way to be strong and be brave and not in tune with our emotions. Would you agree?
I would agree. Yeah. And I mean, I think that that absolutely describes me in terms of, um, I wouldn't say that I've always considered myself as being pretty in tune with my emotions, but if I'm being honest and I'm being transparent, the truth is I have, I have often at different points in my life put the needs and the things going on with my family and with my daughters ahead of my own personal needs. And, while a lot of people would say that that's noble, I would argue that that's not healthy. And that there are times, right? There are seasons of our life where there are seasons when our kids are going to need our primary focus. And I also would never suggest that my daughters are not important, they're not a top priority, but what I am saying is they shouldn't be my only priority. They shouldn't be the only thing that I'm focusing on. And so I'm sharing that to say that a lot of things have happened within my family life, and if there's time, I'll share kind of one more kind of big moment for us. Cool. So about 6 years after our divorce, there was just this series of events that took place that led to the girl's mom um, getting involved with drugs and being in an abusive relationship. And long story short, it kind of climaxed with her committing suicide. And so that was a moment in time that changed the dynamic of my parenting relationship with my daughters. And it turned things from a place of us being co-parents to now me being 100% solo parent and 100% solo parent who was trying to raise daughters who had lost their mom in a tragic way. And so it just kind of it brought me to a point where I felt like what I had to do was take everything that was important to me and put it on the back burner and just focus on my kids and their well-being. And I'm not even saying that that was wrong for that period of life. But what happened was I got stuck there and it became my new norm. And it became the new norm to bend over backwards and do 100% of what I needed to do to make sure that my daughters were happy and healthy and thriving. And, shockingly, they are after this period of time in spite of everything that has happened. But it wasn't fair to those women that I was dating. It wasn't fair to the relationships because I thought that I was ready at different points to have a healthy relationship, but I wasn't. I was never going to be at that point in my life, I was never going to be able to be the type of person that they might have needed me to be. Or at least I was never going to be able to be all in. And people could argue that when you are a single parent, the dynamics of a dating relationship is completely different than when you don't have kids. And maybe there will always be a little bit of a difference in that, maybe your significant other will never get 100% of you because you already have this existing family that needs you. But I can say that I was not emotionally available for my for those that I dated during that period of time because all of my emotional strength was going towards my kids. And so, yeah, I mean, so there are things that are going to happen in our life that are going to kind of force us down these different paths and force us to make these decisions. I don't regret any of these decisions that I've made because I'm happy with where things are. But that's a piece of why I've decided to kind of take a time out and really kind of work on myself and allow myself to heal from everything that had taken place. What's now been 5.5 years ago, after the girl's mom's death.
If you didn't take that break, how do you think that situation would have affected you if you were still in it and carrying forward?
If I was still in a relationship, you mean? Or
If you're still feeling what you described and you're bringing that into your next relationship or your next friendship, like you being emotionally unavailable.
yeah, I think that it would. I mean, obviously, I think it would have prevented me from having the level of intimacy and closeness with a partner, and so it would have prevented me from being able to have that level of a relationship, that level of a quality relationship. And also, on a kind of the collateral damage, if I had headed in that direction, is that I would have been continuing to model unhealthy relationships for my family and for my girls to see, and they are looking at me, whether we want to admit that or we don't want to admit that as parents, our kids are looking at us. And there is a lot of research out there, a lot of literature that supports the fact that daughters are looking at their father and how their father treats other women to have a sense of identity on what they should be looking for and how they should be treated. And so, I take that seriously, and um, so I think that that would have been some collateral damage that also could have taken place if I hadn't taken the time or if I wasn't taking the time to kind of work on myself.
As we close, Rob, what's some advice that you'd like to share with the single fathers out there who are experiencing now what you did when you first went through it and are hoping to not make any substantial mistakes that could hinder themselves in the future?
Yeah. So some advice that I would give, probably the top piece of advice that I would give is to give yourself some grace. I think that a lot of the emotion, there's going to be a lot of emotion that is being felt during that early stages of separation and divorce. And that emotion is okay, but we can allow that emotion to present in self-destructive ways. And so we really need to give ourselves grace and give ourselves time to, be take time to be aware, take time to work on ourselves, slow ourselves down instead of speeding things up. And wherever possible, lean on others for support. And I think that that is one of the things that I did not do. I tried to do things alone for a lot of that process. I didn't really know what support was out there, but I also didn't really seek it out as I probably should have. So give yourself grace, take some time to work on yourself, and recognize the progress that you are making on a day-to-day basis as well. I think a lot of times for those of us who are in a situation like this, or that are kind of used to being high performers or used to kind of crushing it in all aspects of our life or in our workspace, we are so focused on that end result. And we tend to measure our level of achievement based on whether or not we reach that end result, as opposed to looking back at all the progress that we've already made. And so if we take the time to sit there and look at ourselves and look at the growth that's taken place and we celebrate that, it just changes our mindset. It changes our attitude to one of being positive, and it puts us in a place where we're able to, really just kind of be present and there for our families.